and thank you for joining us this afternoon. My name is Chris Marlow. My microphone's feeding back, and I'm the editorial director for digital media for The Hollywood Reporter. I think the very fact that I've been invited to moderate this panel says something about the state of the industry that we're all working in, that traditional entertainment companies have embraced and are learning the significance of the mobile as a platform, as a lifestyle, as a way of communicating with their audience, as a way of getting communication in return, and just a way to be part of everyone's life, which is pretty much what all creators want to do. Luckily, I'm in the position of having a panel today that's actually doing it instead of just talking about it, which is always even more fun. Can we do something about my mic? Because it's going to bug me, if not everyone else. And so therefore, I'd like to introduce the people that have been kind enough to join us this afternoon, in no particular order. Paul Scanlon, co-founder and COO of MOBA TV. And we have our favorite mobile story that maybe we'll drag out later. Bill Stratton, Vice President of Business Development for Turner Broadcasting. I'm abbreviating people's titles in interest of time, but trust me, read the brochure, read people's bios, and you're going to be very impressed with the accomplishments and the achievements, and it'll be clearly obvious why this panel's been put together. Daniel Tibbetts is what comes to mind as a particularly good example of reading somebody's background. He's joined us today as Executive Vice President of GoTV Labs, part of GoTV Networks. Louis K. Gump, Vice President Mobile for Weather Channel Interactive. Bill Sanders, VP Programming, Sony Pictures Digital. Am I even close to your current title, Bill?
Close.
Okay, sorry. Sony has rejiggered where mobile fits into their international plans, so I'm a little behind the curve there. And last but certainly not least, John Najarian, Senior Vice President of New Media for E-Entertainment. And with that rapid introduction, we'll get right to it. I want to start by singling out Louis, despite his expectations to the contrary, I'm sure. The Weather Channel has quietly been accomplishing some really impressive things. But mainly the newest one that you and I were alluding to the other day was some of the cross-platform integration, which to more entertainment-oriented channels seems a little less than instinctive. Explain what you're doing there and kind of how did you get there? What are you learning from doing this?
Sure, and I'll try to keep the focus on video to a certain extent, but also the thing that I do want to share with you, and it's probably significantly different than even 6 to 12 months ago, is that we're increasingly seeing the linking of platforms. We're seeing it in two dimensions. One of those dimensions is within the mobile or wireless platform. So if in the past we defined the world as kind of mobile web, also known as WAP, video, downloads, and messaging, now we're seeing browsers that launch or will launch a video player. We're seeing downloads that have a messaging component and a number of other things. So increasingly the platform lines are becoming a little less constraining than they have been in the past, although they're still very real, in particular with respect to development. The second thing is that we're seeing increasingly weather.com users who will then be interested in a mobile platform or a mobile product of various types. So we're starting to see this really interesting and widely predicted phenomenon of cross-platform activity. I'll give you the most recent example that has had major implications for us. For a long time, when consumers entered weather.com on a browser, on a Trio or a BlackBerry or other smartphone, they would have gotten our website that was programmed for a PC experience with a broadband connection. And now we have enabled device detection as of a couple of months ago, and I know other content companies are doing the same thing, so that when you enter that URL, you don't get the weather.com from PC, you get our mobile web experience, which is much better, much more tailored for that place. So I think what we're seeing is a clear blurring of lines, and at the same time, a really interesting growth phenomenon, and that is that more and more people are adopting mobile all the time. Mobile web is growing rapidly. You look at news, weather, sports, entertainment. You see it across the board. I think mobile web reaches the largest number of users, but video is second. We currently reach about 1 million consumers or more through a variety of platforms, including GoTV, MobiTV, Smart Video, Vcast, and others. And so you're seeing a lot of different ways for consumers to get content. And I'll just leave you with a statistic as we go on to other places. eMarketer has just released a report saying that at the end of 2006, they predict that in the U.S., about 3 million people are going to be watching video. In 2009, that number will be about 36 million. So what we're seeing is about a tenfold projected increase over 4 years. That gives us a sense of the promise for this space.
I like the idea of, I usually call it, instead of cross-platform, using it as leaking is probably more how consumers think of it. How difficult it is, though, to preserve the continuity of experience that's important to your brand when you do that sort of approach?
And I'll keep this response brief, but the short story is it's hard because the mobile platform is so challenging to develop for, in particular with downloads, where you literally have to develop by handset, but also for videos where you have to encode according to different specs based on how the content is displayed, et cetera. So just getting it right for mobile is one thing. Making it consistent with the rest of the platforms is an additional challenge.
We have two Bills here, so forgive me if I sound redundant, but Bill from Turner. You guys are also dealing with many of the same problems of user experience continuity. Is it easier because you're dealing with branded content?
I think the way we tend to look at it, certainly depending upon which brand we're talking about, whether it's CNN or Cartoon Network, Adult Swim, NASCAR, each brand represents obviously its own principles and sensibilities. And increasingly, I think as Lewis touched on it, the cross-platform, not just usage from a consumer perspective, but from a production perspective internally in our company, we've just made some recent announcements within our structure where individuals that are in charge of, let's say, the NASCAR broadcast on TNT, we're a television rights holder with NASCAR, that individual and that group of employees is also responsible now for our web production and broadband creation. So what that allows structurally is obviously to take care of the sensibilities of the brand itself cross-platform, but functionally within our company we're literally producing for multi-platform and bringing the brand strength to each platform, differentiated though by experience.
Well, one of the things I was curious about, to follow on that thought, the way you do your carrier deals is like CNN is pretty much everywhere. TCM is just on Singular. Adult Swim, and I may be wrong, but this is last I checked, is on Sprint, Singular, and Amped. Cartoon Network is Sprint and Singular. What's the thinking behind not just putting everything more out there? How are you making these kind of decisions?
It's an interesting question. Actually, if I can enlarge the question a little bit, it really sort of represents, I think, in the wireless community, particularly in the video space, the lack of consistency across carrier with how they're making a video offering to consumers. So what's available on MobiTV for one price is obviously different than what's available on Singular or what's available on Sprint, and Verizon Vcast. And the analogy that we as consumers all are familiar with over the last 20, 25 years is basic cable. Basic cable, whether it's on Comcast or whether it's through DirecTV or their satellite providers, tends to be fairly similar in terms of that basic core offering. And so our representation of our brands, whether it's Adult Swim, Cartoon, CNN, NASCAR, TCM, and others, reflects the unique offerings of the carriers and how they make their offerings to the consumer. And I think ultimately what we'll see is the business Lewis mentioned reaching 1 million customers across multiple partners. I think that's a great statistic, and perhaps that could be a point in time where the business finally scales. But when you get into the 10 or 15 or 20 million type of audience, that's when the business truly scales. And I think for the marketplace to adopt that, the carriers will have to simplify the packaging, somewhat standardize, and make consumers understand what they're getting for what price and what brands.
So we're still in a part of it is just what you offer fits in with what they wish to offer.
Absolutely.
And it's trying to find some sort of a middle ground. Daniel, how does that work? I mean, the two products you've got I'm most familiar with, I think, is your sports tracker and the deal with Univision that I will mispronounce, so I'll leave it to you. Can you explain a little bit about how that works from your point of view, and then getting it to your audience through this kind of gateway?
So I don't know if two different types of project or channels that exist under GoTV. One is the licensing and repurposing of content, i.e. like Univision.
Okay.
A second is looking at original, just newly branded content or channels that we put out into the market, like Hip Hop Official or Alt Rock,
Sure.
which specifically target a demographic and a lifestyle. I think that the challenge is certainly, as was stated, with brands. We know Univision, you know it, you see it, you click through and you go, oh, I know this brand, I like the content, so I go get it. Hip Hop Official, Alt Rock, or even our women's network, Diva, a little more difficult to not only sell into the carriers, but also to sell to the consumer, because as the consumer is scrolling down, they're not going to know what Diva is as a brand or what it means ultimately. However, if we have the right brands and cross promotion within the product, hopefully we're targeting that consumer, and they're ultimately going to the carrier or the store to buy that particular product.
Can you give an example of how you've seen that actually work in real life?
I would say one of the key elements we look for, and I wouldn't get into some of the specific brands we're talking to today, but what we look for is making sure that there's cross-promotion elements associated with it. It's a brand with an alternative marketing distribution system that I'm going to tap into on a contractual level. So that way I know that if a consumer has an affinity for that brand and I have it in my hip-hop product, they're getting notices and information or emails about the mobile content and where it can be found.
And so it's almost old-fashioned in that regard, as far as identifying your audience, targeting them with affinities.
Right. It's much easier, obviously, to market and more cost-effective to a niche group than it obviously is a broad group.
Right, right. John, you've been sort of getting stuff started on E. I'm only familiar with The Awful Truth, of course, and some of the red carpet moments. You're bringing Wild on to the mobile. Is this designed to draw traffic back to the linear? Is it standalone? Or what's your philosophy to what you offer on the mobile content?
Well, for us, I mean, we approached this over a year ago, really looking at the space. Wanted to take what the consumer's expectation is on the television network with linear and create an environment for the mobile user that they would come to expect as being an e-experience, but for mobile. So it wasn't about necessarily just taking content and repurposing it. It was about finding the right content, the right mix, whether it's the topical news content, the extra movie premiere type coverage that we do, the red carpets, the gossip like The Awful Truth, and Watch with Kristen, who talks about all the things going on in television. We feel like it's naturally inherent for the mobile platform to take the content that we have on linear in some respects, take the content we even have online, and convert it into content that works well for the mobile phone.
So you're looking at it as what works on the platform, but also what consumers today might actually expect you to be doing.
Right. And for us, we're looking at it like, what's the brand experience? E-Online has a specific brand experience. It's everything celebrity and Hollywood and pop culture. The network has the same brand experience. The mobile phone needs to have that same brand experience. So we're focused on it. We don't want a consumer to go in and get something that they would expect a television network, let's say, to carry.
Mm-hmm.
But more what they would expect if they're, killing 10 minutes of time.
Right.
So.
Which is an excellent lead-in to one of my favorite questions for Bill about Sony. Everyone else is doing short form. We've learned to call it snacks. We call it various things. You've been having, to me, relatively surprising success with the deal that you've got going in Italy for full-length films. It's with HG3,
Right.
H3G.
They call it 3 Italy.
Yeah, oh,
But
right,
it's
because,
owned- it's
so it
owned
looks
by-
like a typo.
Right.
Right. Which is a division of
Hutchison.
Hutchinson, right, okay. But you're actually doing full-length movies with almost DVD-style controls. Explain a
That's
little
right.
bit and tell us how successful it is, because I was surprised when I learned.
Well, we're actually trying many, many different
Well, that's, yes, of
formats.
course.
And, but because Sony isn't a provider of news or weather or sports or other kind of contemporaneous events where you really need to see them live, in fact, practically everything that we do is recorded entertainment that, if anything, is probably hurt by being joined in progress. It's really something where you want to start at the beginning and watch the whole story, and certainly probably the last thing you want to do is join the last 10 minutes. We've been looking at various applications and methods through carriers that we can deliver our products on mobile handsets, where you can enjoy it perhaps like you might read a book. That traditionally, when we read a book, we don't say, I'm going to put aside next Tuesday afternoon and read the entire novel. We're perfectly comfortable with picking it up, reading it as long as we like, putting it down, resuming where we left off. Consumers have now gotten used to doing that with video too, thanks to TiVo and portable DVD players, and actually just regular DVD players, where you can access particular moments or chapters directly if you want to, but then if you just press play, you can just keep going until you decide to stop. So with 3 Italy, they actually have a technology that enables you to pause and resume without actually downloading content to reside on the phone. So in other words, they're streaming it on demand, but when you hit pause, it pauses it on the server end, it bookmarks where you left off, and then the next time you start, just like the cheapest DVD player you can buy today, it says, would you like to resume where you left off? And we think this is one of the ways in which video is going to be consumed on small devices. Certainly if you fell asleep while watching the last 10 minutes of Desperate Housewives and you were commuting on the train the next day to work and you want to know what happened, if it could be made available to you, I think at that point, that 10 minutes, you'd be happy to have it on a 1-inch screen, because it's at that point all you really care about is what happened, how the story turned out.
How does the consumer pay for this? Is it per
So-
movie, VOD?
Again, we're working with a lot of different models. Some will be subscription, some will be pay-per-view. In the case of 3 Italy, it is a individual, I guess, pay-per-title offer, not unlike VOD on cable, where you'll pay €7 for a given movie. You'll have 24 hours in which to watch it. Over time, that window will get longer, which we think is a more optimal experience. And you can start it and stop it as many times as you like over that period.
And what's the price point?
It's €7, about $9,
Okay.
and they're anecdotally, it's something like 1,000 uses a day, which for one carrier in Italy with a small number of 3G video-capable phones out there to date, that's actually pretty good uptake.
Yeah, it seems like it to me. Paying for content. MobiTV launched a program for advertisers that I've been kind of paying attention to. The equivalent of what a TV station would call the local avail segments. Local affiliates replacing national ads with their own, etc. You've already signed up, last I checked, Jeep and Axe and a few other kind of predictable major national things, but has there been a lot of interest, and what do consumers think?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we're seeing phenomenal interest in our advertising inventory, and the way we're approaching advertising is, I think, a little bit, we're following the cable model using that inventory, but we're actually approaching it quite differently, where we'll actually replace that advertising inventory today with the standard 15 and 30-second spots, but over time, we have an interactive platform so that we can replace that advertising with ads that will link you directly into the commerce engines or the vending machines of the carrier decks. So you can imagine having more targeted advertising, more geographically targeted advertising, and actionable advertising. And we feel like that, for our service, we're overwriting existing ads. So we're not adding any incremental ads. We're just we're actually making the experience better, so we feel pretty good about it. And there is a huge demand for that inventory right now because there's just not that much available, and it's a classic supply and demand scenario. So.
Now, is this content that the consumer is paying for?
Yeah, this is
in addition to the
so
placement?
we offer, very similar to what Bill Stratton was saying, is we offer what we call our basic cable package, and we've tried to position it that way so that people would understand it. It would be a familiar model. It would be consistent from one carrier to the next, but still allow the carriers to differentiate because, let's face it, these aren't cable companies. These are all nationally very competitive carriers that are competing against one another versus geographically monopolizing different areas. So there's an opportunity to create that basic cable package, but then within those channels, there's, just like watching CNN or MSNBC on my basic cable, there's advertising inventory in there. So it's kind of a combination. It's a paid service, but there's advertising also helps subsidize the service, allows us to add more content and keep the prices down.
Technologically, how much of a challenge is it? Because your service is quite famously live.
Mm-hmm.
How difficult is it to integrate that stuff?
Technically, it's not very difficult for us. I mean, it's actually the way our platform was designed was, even in the early days, it was designed to support this. So it wasn't really, for us, implementing it wasn't about creating the technology so much. It was about getting the mass of subscribers that would make it interesting and worthwhile to start implementing. And that's what we just decided to do last quarter of 05.
So you're kind of to a point now where advertisers can see the critical mass building?
Yeah, absolutely. We have the subscriber base, we have the usage, and quite frankly, the demand for people wanting to advertise on MobiTV was so great that we couldn't hold it back any longer.
All right. Bill Turner, Bill Turner, that'll be your last name from now on. You mentioned NASCAR.com launching on the mobile platform. One of the things I was interested in, first of all, NASCAR.com has been way ahead of the curve with interactivity and some of the on-site stuff, et cetera. But also, you're launching it as a premium product. What will consumers get, and what's the strategy behind making it an add-on across all carriers? It's a premium. So what's the thinking there, and why is it worth it?
NASCAR, for people that follow the sports business and industry, NASCAR has been the fastest growing sport in America and the U.S. in terms of television ratings, in terms of advertising support, in terms of viewership, merchandising, and a number of other elements. It is a very loyal, rabid fan base. It's a fan base that's used to be considered geographical. Now it's actually representative of the country, spread broadly across the country. And so we looked at sort of the ability of the brand to drive a loyal audience. And in the television industry, and this is important, and I've said this before on a number of panels, Turner, taking a step back for a second, it's important because we've structured where we don't have a wireless division and we don't have a broadband division. We have a group and individuals that go cross-platform. And so when we look at NASCAR as a brand, we're looking at it across wireless and broadband and television. And consistently, whether it's on the internet or whether it's on television, the loyal audience and that fan base lends itself to what we call pulling that consumer through basic. And what that means is, as Paul alluded to, let's say they may have a basic service and some live or video content or race content from NASCAR could be an application that's available to a wide set of consumers. But when you have an audience like that, that's that type of rabid audience, you have the ability to actually pull them through multiple packages in a service. And so that's been our strategy with NASCAR, and it's been successful because as a carrier partner, one of the things that we want to drive for our carrier partners is not just their handset purchases or their usage of the service, consumers' usage of the service, but also the data plan and additional packages that they may end up offering. And so NASCAR is a perfect example of being able to take that audience and pull them through that business model for that particular carrier.
Okay. Louis, some of the premium stuff that you offer, so here's actually some of the most interesting. I know it's not pertinent to today, but the SMS stuff I think you do is very cool. With the pollen count. I could actually probably use that. The game day weather forecast for Major League Baseball games. These are just some of the favorite things that I wrote down. But aside from the obvious brand value, are these type of services an actual standalone revenue stream?
Sure.
Such as the NASCAR.com or some of the other things?
Well, just as a frame of reference, and there may be an exception somewhere, but generally speaking, we look at mobile as a standalone profit center. And so we don't do anything, at least over the long haul, for marketing purposes. Every now and then we'll run into a situation where we have to get started and we lose money for some period of time, but we just look at that as an investment. So yes, we look at this as a standalone piece, and even with the video, where we have a premium channel that's just the weather channel on top of basic, that turns out to be pretty scalable as soon as you raise awareness.
John, are you looking at any kind of premium stuff for E? You seem to be such a good position for like a Mobisode type setup, or I don't want to tell you where you might be going, but some of your brands are so clearly lend themselves to this kind of thing. What are your plans?
Well, I think initially with the audience the size it is in the video space, that I think we'd rather be part of a basic bundle. And
Okay.
I think for us to get mass adoption of the product for the carriers, I think it's incumbent on a lot of networks to at least start that way and start to build some real desire for this category, because I think all of us need to figure out is really how to cut through and reach this audience that gets a lot of messages about what their cell phone is offering, and it's not particularly clear as to necessarily who you're buying video from and what are the different price points and what you're getting. And I think that's just going to get more confusing as we go further out. We are looking at subscription services, but not necessarily on the video side. So we're looking at downloadable applications. We're actually close on something.
Okay.
We've got some
You'll tell me.
SMS businesses and WAP businesses we're doing that seem naturally to fit naturally with what we're doing on our website or fit naturally with what we're doing on air. So
How
you'll see more of those
popular are
coming.
your personalization products? Because you've got quite an offering of those on the website.
Such as you're talking about?
Wallpapers and ringtones.
Oh, those. We just launched that actually, at least the site, the section on the site.
Oh,
We've been
okay,
working
sorry.
with Wallpaper Universe. But that's been doing very well since we launched. It's only been up for a couple weeks, so.
Oh, okay. I thought I was coming.
Yeah,
late
we're
to the party.
continuing to add to it, but we're aggressively going after the space on the subscription side, but not necessarily on the video side.
Please
I
join
was
us.
just going to say, I think what you'll start to see is, one of the trends that we all know is the carriers are moving more and more off deck, purchasing of content and using web platforms like we all have up here to drive consumption of wireless content. What that may allow in the future is, you mentioned NASCAR for a second. With our company, we have a broadband subscription service, obviously, on the web. And as you move to off-network subscription services via wireless, then you obviously have the ability to bundle and merchandise across platform with subscription services. And I think that'll be certainly a opportunity for all of the content providers to begin to drive more and more content and packages to consumers that are a CNN news junkie or a NASCAR fan or a weather fan. And I think that's one of the trends that we'll see, but we'll also continue to try and monetize that business with advertising, because the cable business and cable networks are extremely strong financially today as a result of having two revenue streams. And I think everybody understands the basic economics of the business. And so we want to be able to obviously have a combination of both, in addition to the transactional e-commerce third revenue stream that Paul mentioned as well.
Is this going to be, we were kind of talking about consumers being confused, though. Is that going to be simpler for consumers to understand because they know they're just getting CNN? Or could it be even more complicated because they're getting their phone from one guy? And
I think that's where we will start to use our web platforms. If CNN reaches 25 million people a month on its web platform, we actually have the advantage of using that to communicate clearly what our offerings are.
I see.
And I think right now that's what's missing in the wireless space, is that there is no communication mechanism other than what the carrier does, whether it's at retail or whether it's in their other vehicles for marketing. Once the content providers have the motivation, the ability, and the technology to start using their own web platforms to drive the business, I think that'll help significantly.
You're right there. Paul, how does this fit in with what you guys do, though, if we're looking at premium products bought directly from a website?
Actually, it ties in perfectly with our strategy. I mean, our strategy is really more of the cable model, where we have a basic subscription and then we use premium sets of channels, like maybe a NASCAR type of application. So we would work with Turner to use that as a mechanism to pull people into the basic Mobi TV and get the added revenue for the premium package. So it ties in perfectly. And it doesn't have to be Mobi TV. And remember that we also power the carrier branded products like
Yes.
Sprint TV and Alltel and others. So, you know, we're either doing it for our own brand or helping the carriers kind of create this model. And so far it's working really well. In fact, one of the things that I think is a real indicator of where, you know, the accomplishments that we've made, Sprint now bundles TV in with every single data plan that they have. And so their basic package, I mean, if you think about it, the analogy to cable is good, but remember, we're starting with a wireless company, right? So when you go get cable, you're subscribing to cable, so you get the basic package. When you go get a cell phone, you're not going to get cable, you're going to get your cell phone. So even the basic package is a premium upsell, right? So you have to sell them something, but what Sprint's done, which I think is very smart, is they've actually bundled content into their basic package. Basic meaning a voice and data and other subscription plans. So now they're kind of getting people into the position of starting with something. So every phone that leaves a Sprint store, practically every phone, every new phone that they're selling now, has access to TV. And we do, you know, a very small number of channels in the lower packages, but we've seen huge uptake there. So that allows us to utilize that that channel to then upsell people to, you know, the NASCAR packages or the Mobi TV subscriptions or Sprint TV Live and others. And it's been very successful so far.
What's working better for you guys, original content or recognizable stuff?
The answer is really both. I mean, it depends on the category. I mean, really, it sounds like a non-answer, but it really is the answer, is that we've seen really strong success in the live TV, the linear programming, just the same programming that you see at home.
Right.
And that's sort of, the way we look at it is that's kind of it's a familiar channel, people are buying it, they know what they're getting, they want to have some of that there it gives them value when they're subscribing. But beyond that, once they're subscribers to a basic channel package, if a lot of those channels aren't necessarily linear live channels, but they're channels that we either do in cooperation with our partners like NBC or Max Sports, those channels are very popular on the service. So literally, I would say about 50% of our most popular channels are the clip channels, the channels that we're creating specifically for mobile.
Oh, that's interesting. Bill, you were briefly explaining to me how you're using the mobile platform in some countries where you don't have a linear broadcast element to the program. Can you explain some of those ventures and why it makes sense for you?
Sure.
I remember we talked about the sports one in Germany and a couple of others.
Sure. Actually, Sony International Television programs a number of channels or networks around the world, which people in the U.S. aren't familiar with because they're not on here. But they have such names as AXN, which is an action channel. There's Sony Entertainment Television, which in South America plays things like Lost and Desperate Housewives. In Hong Kong, it plays all 3 CSIs. It tends to vary depending on the territory. We have another channel called Animax, which is all Japanese anime, which is extremely popular. And so we're finding ways both to take those existing channels in territories where they do exist on cable or satellite and bring them in one form or another to mobile. In some cases, that's literally retransmitting the same feed. In others, it's building a loop of anywhere from 2 to 12 hours and repeating it. In others, it's creating actually on-demand services where there's a certain number of these programs available for you to watch as you desire. And then there's countries where we don't yet have these channels on cable or satellite, where we're putting together mobile versions of them. So you might actually be able to get Animax, in certain countries in Europe where you can't get it on your cable system. But we've actually launched the first of these just 2 weeks ago in Germany. Our AXN channel is now on Vodafone as a premium service. And even though you do have to pay for it separately, it's not in their basic tier. On the other hand, if you don't subscribe to the cable or satellite networks in Germany that carry that service, this is another way for you to get it. And frankly, it's cheaper than it would be getting it on cable.
Is that something you think might work over in this country?
I could see it conceivably working in this country too, particularly because the barrier to entry in cable is so expensive here. Establishing new channels is a very difficult proposition, and it may be that mobile is another way to try out the market. It's certainly something we're looking at, and going forward though, we're also looking at ways that we can enhance the experience, and there's been a lot of talk about how the content needs to be, in some ways different for mobile. But even when it's linear, just retransmitted programming, I think there are more things that can be done to make it a better experience that are not yet really being taken advantage of. I mean, even when you watch just regular television on a cable box, it gives you all kinds of interactive elements, at least to the degree of telling you what you're watching, which I think the mobile really needs to do, because surfing through menus on a WAP screen is really not a great way to watch TV.
I think we could agree on that one.
Yeah. The new version of Mobi TV, by the way, fully PG, everything is there.
Does it?
Very cable-like interface, yeah. Although
when can
even
we
better than a set-top box, actually, is what most people have told us.
When can we see that?
It's available, commercial. It's out in the market today.
I need to upgrade.
Yeah, it's on Sprint, it's on Singular, it's on Alltel, so you can get it now.
The issue that we have, since we're working, internationally as well as domestically, is that it also has to do with the carrier and what particular method of delivery they're using. I would love to provide an interface, whether it's Mobi's new one or some other Java-based player that would let you do all sorts of things, but it really comes down to each individual carrier and whether they're going to let you do that.
What you're allowed to do.
That's our quest, is to try to rid the industry of the WAP RTSP solutions. It's not a good way to navigate content.
Certainly have my vote. Billy, am I allowed to ask you about Casino Royale yet?
It's a movie that's being shot that'll be finished in June with Daniel Craig and.
Is that who you picked for Bond?
And I can't really tell you about anything we're doing on mobile for it, really.
I'm just thinking you did so well with Spider-Man 2.
True.
And this is such an international franchise.
No, we actually have a lot of things going around. This might be familiar to you. See if this works.
Very nice.
So at any rate, we're going to have.
As well?
Sure, but I can't broadcast that.
Oh, okay.
We're going to have quite an offering around both Casino Royale and actually all of the entire Bond catalog for mobile, including all kinds of personalization products, video of varying lengths. It should be a pretty robust package.
Did I understand correctly that you're going to be revisiting some of the catalog Bond titles for this?
All of them.
All of them. Brace yourself.
All 20, yeah.
Wallpaper of Ursula Andress coming out of the ocean?
I hope.
Okay. Just checking. We could get the guys start ordering now. Daniel, to get a little more serious again, you had something, I was having fun with the Independent Spirit Awards coverage that you guys did. And you had some fun at the Oscars, some of it at its expense, but that's okay too, because it deserves it. What is, you called something the mobile live to tape talkback segment. Can you
Yeah,
explain that and why it's cool?
Well, it was really the first time this was done in mobile, and it is something that is done in traditional local newscasts, which is simply the ability to have our anchor in studio communicate directly live with our reporter in the field, so that we can get direct dialogue, communication, interview, additional information live. Now, we're a VOD service, so we don't broadcast it live, but the just simple ability for us to operate in a traditional broadcast media operation was, pretty exciting to put together.
Can you explain a little bit more how it actually worked on the night?
So basically,
or the late afternoon?
I'm sorry.
The late afternoon.
I mean, basically, so the idea is the GoTV on their premium channels. One of them is GoTV Super Channel and GoTV Select, which is an aggregate of content. It really is that basic cable service. Within it, we offer the GoTV News and News Brief, which again, it's the perspective of trying to deliver something a little bit different than maybe ABC News is, or maybe the traditional broadcast is delivering, or even the internet. So with that particular instant, we had our anchor in the studio. We had a reporter out in the field. We were able to gain certain access that I think was actually quite exclusive for mobile. And again, just report back if we were with a celebrity, if we were talking about an event, if we were with a producer that won an award or was a part of the system. We could literally, our anchor could be there and ask the question, and I don't have a specific question in mind, but
No.
the ability to just say, more information from the reporter at that point and get information back into our studio. So it enabled that two-way communication process of our in-studio group and our field group.
Oh, cool, thanks. Paul, MobiTV did a deal that I wanted to know kind of how it made business sense, to be frank, with the Universal.
You might want to know the same thing.
The Universal Music deal.
The Universal Music deal absolutely made sense for us. So one of the things
explain what it is for people that.
So what it is we went out and we've licensed through Universal Music, and we're working with the other labels access to the music videos. And this was really in response to wanting to create some music video channels in MobiTV and offering those to our subscribers, because it's very snackable content. Well, unfortunately, in cable, there really aren't that many true music video channels left, and the ones that do exist don't actually have the rights to deliver via wireless. So after spending a lot of time trying to get channels to license us their content, like MTV, VH1, we finally took it upon ourselves to actually go and do the deals directly with the music labels and create our own channels. So we've launched 4 of our own music video channels: Chaos, Shift, The Mic, and V40, which is our top hits. They're doing extremely well on the service. So and we produce. So we're using the music video content, but we put our own interstitials, and we'll eventually have our own VJs, and we're creating our own channels, and it's been very successful for us.
I have no doubt of that. I think what I'm curious about is people, MTV quite famously got very annoyed when the record companies started charging them to run the videos. This can't be an inexpensive thing for you to do, but you're including them as part of your basic service.
Yeah, for us, it's the cost of, we're either going to, license the channel from someone else. The costs are, you could argue it either way. It's
Okay.
not unreasonable for us. But remember, one of the things that we do have now, thankfully, is after 2.5 years of running the service, we have a fair amount of scale, so that we can actually monetize that content in a lot of different ways. And so, depending on how you look at it, it may have been, a fairly large number, but after you monetize it across the subscriber base and the number of products and the value add that we're getting from the relationship, it makes financial sense for us.
Okay. Either of the bills, actually, this one's convenient. You both have very close relationships with some of the best libraries of content there are. Does this make it easier to license stuff for the mobile platform, or do you guys have the same headaches that everybody else does as they defer to each other?
I spend entirely too much of my time dealing with those very issues, and it's still extremely murky waters. And I saw a panel yesterday that got into this a little bit. talking about the guilds with negotiations upcoming.
We won't go that deep.
But there's just so many ramifications, particularly in going backwards. In going forwards, obviously, everybody now, when they're looking at deals, they're trying to incorporate mobile and IPTV and every other format yet to be devised by mankind.
That's
But
actually what the contract says, by
it
the way.
does. It does.
That's literally the
in
wording.
universes yet to be discovered, I think.
Yes.
But going backwards, obviously, mobile exhibition was not anticipated, pay-per-view use was not anticipated, taking pieces of movies and charging to see them wasn't anticipated. So there's a lot of interpretation going on. A lot of it has to do with even if a studio were to take a position that they had the right contractually to use something, if it was going to antagonize some talent that they're in business with today, they're not necessarily going to do that. So it's very, very slow going. Probably the most difficult aspect of all has been and will probably continue to be music, where there are all sorts of overlapping rights issues with using music.
Yeah, that's a whole panel on its own, I think.
It truly is. So, we're kind of feeling our way through, but even though we may have rights or own outright, this huge library, doesn't mean we can just, slap it onto mobile.
Rats. Turner has actually quite a heritage of licensing content and refreshing it for the public. Is it any easier?
It is getting easier. I think, we're on both sides of the table when it comes to either acquiring rights or licensing our networks out to cable operators and satellite providers and other distributors who are looking at multi-platform rights in the same way that we look at rights when we acquire content. So we're kind of on both sides of the table, and the attorneys are obviously looking at how do we manage both, so that we as a packager of content, a packager of libraries. Cartoon Network started in 1992 with the Hanna-Barbera library and Looney Tunes, and has been very successful, not just running that programming, but developing its own original series and programming. And so there's a valuable role for what a company does, such as ourselves, where we do take libraries, we package them, we present them, but it also allows us to build original programming and build additional libraries on top of that.
Can you just explain, as a little sidebar here, what you're doing with Turner Classic Movies in the mobile? Because that one, when I initially heard about it, struck me as unusual, but then it made perfect sense. So.
Turner Classic Movies, we acquired, there's a number of libraries that make up the Turner Classic Movies library overall. And it is on cable TV, it's a non-ad supported network, so it's advertising free. But part of in the original acquisition of a number of libraries, as people, for movie buffs that are out there, understand that the movie experience in the 20s and 30s and 40s, when you would go see Gone with the Wind, or Casablanca, or a number of titles from that era, you would actually have a matinee experience where you would see a cartoon prior to the show. You may see an introduction, a la Alfred Hitchcock. And so there are, within our libraries, a number of pieces of programming that are short form in nature that lend itself to whatever the movie title brand is, that we have not exploited that well on cable TV, simply because that experience is more long form and someone is sitting down ready to experience a 2.5 hour movie. So within our library, there is a number of pieces of programming that lend itself to wireless and multi-platform.
Interesting. I look forward to seeing some of it, because the bits I've seen are very, very cool. Daniel, I actually know you best before joining GoTV as an original content guy, creator of the mobisodes, et cetera, for people that don't live and breathe this stuff. What do you see the balance? Will we be seeing more original content? Will it always be both, or streamed versus, live rather, versus download? Where do you see this going from your perspective?
So that's a big question.
It's a
right?
huge question.
And I'll try to condense it. There's a couple points to it that have to be addressed in my perspective. One is, first part of that is I'm going to take it as, what is the correlation between traditional development and production
certainly a better way to look at
and
it,
mobile.
sure.
And I think there's a lot of similarities today. I think there's been a very quick evolution to the mobile market, and it's evolved very much like really cable did, right? We started with a broad sense of USA Network, and then you ended up with, you know, Animal Planet, Food Network, and then I read about the Horse Network, you know, and programming for that. It becomes very niche oriented. So, you know, that's one element of it. The second element is you definitely look at the evolution of cable as acquired licensed programming first. Look at FX, right? It was a lot of product from 20th television and then evolved into its own original content, and that is what it's known for. HBO started as a movie network, but they're known today as, you know, for their original content, and even still to this day, it's still about 70% acquired content and 30% original, but that's what they're known for. So there's always going to be that combination of the two. But I think ultimately, mobile content companies will be known for their original content. They will be known when they find their Talk Soup, right? Their South Park. When they discover that, that is what they're going to be most known for. Today, the process is still selling to the carriers. You're still a business-to-business operation, and the carriers are the gatekeeper, just like the network executives and just like the stations. And to go to them, you have to go with brands. You have to sell them something that is easily identified to the consumer base, and something that ultimately, right, that has a level of protection on their behalf. It's the same analogy when I used to pitch NBC dramas, right? And I'll say it this way: they could take a bet on Stephen Bochco, and if it failed, hey, it was Stephen Bochco, right? Take a bet over here, and it fails, there's liability, there's accountability. And I think that same thing exists today, and we have to absolutely think in the same terms as programmers, as developers, and go in with something that is tangible to the carriers, that then they say, I get it, I can put it out there, it's a safe bet, it will give me viewership, promotion, you know, and it's a little bit safer in nature. We then build around it our original creative ideas and hope that we can direct the consumer from that brand to something unique. And that's really the way I look at it today.
So we're still actually sort of in a nascent phase of getting original content out there.
I think we are. I think it's possible. One of the things I love about Go and what we do is because we already have these channels and we already have a consumer base. It's very easy for me to find something unique, a personality, work with a producer, and say, let's test that, let's try it out, and I can put it on the channel immediately, and I can watch the viewership levels. I can see how many people go to that and its reaction, and then I can develop more content. We used to do this with shows like Good Day Live and syndication. I knew I had the outlet, so I could test ideas and product and then launch them into shows, you know, for syndication.
And that's sort of, Bill, what you were saying about some of what Sony can do in other countries is test the market for what in that market is original content as opposed to an established brand.
Right, and I think even within original programming, which our domestic TV department is getting into a bit as well, they also see it as a place where they can try out ideas that might end up being cable or network shows.
Yep. And launch them back
in a somewhat more protected forum.
The original idea of just original content, let's launch it here.
I see. Did you want to get in on this, Tom?
Well, you know, when you look at the shelf space, it's so different on a cell phone, and I agree with you, Dan.
It's an excellent
so
point.
much different versus a television set, and it's a different viewing experience, different timeline. You know, if you've got 5 or 10 minutes, you know, let's face it, they're not watching hour-long dramas yet, and there's only 1 million customers watching video, and it's not necessarily the same demo that you have on your own network. So I think you have to lead with the top brands. You've got to get them in. You've got to get them in watching something. They got to get the experience. They got to understand this is kind of a neat, great environment to go watch video. Get them coming back on a regular basis. Then start to tease them with the stuff that you've created. If you go in and you put in your shelf space, on E, we had all sorts of original concepts that nobody had ever heard of, but we think are really great products. No one's gonna click in just to check it out because they don't have that much time. And if you wait for the buffering and everything else that goes on the cell phone today, you're going to lose them, and we don't want to lose them. So for us, we're going to lead with the brands. We are developing new ideas that we think we can leverage. Let's say the talent that we have, that we can put in the metadata on the description of the phone to try to pull people in, and it can be innovative and new, and not necessarily something that's existing today, but it's got to incorporate some element that the consumer's going to have a quick affinity to.
So next year, you'll have original content to talk about?
Well, we have original content today,
No, I meant
actually. Yeah, but we'll
fully
do,
formed,
looking
without...
at, yeah, looking at stuff that, or content that's completely different.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say probably by next year. We'd start to sprinkle it in.
Now, Paul, you're a home for both.
Yeah, let me just add something to both the points. One of the things that I think is really important, and one of the reasons why we've tended to lean towards, you know, more of the existing content created for television. Maybe we're repurposing it in a way or tailoring it for mobile, but I think we can't underestimate the importance of production value. And the production value really is in the live linear feeds today. That's where a lot of money is being spent, a lot of production value, the studios, everything. And until that production value reaches the Mobisode type products, I think you'll always have, because you're asking people to pay for it, right? And they'll be paying for it, and if it doesn't look like what their people, I mean, let's face it, we live in the #1 TV economy or TV industry in the world. We're very spoiled when it comes to production values. And I think people are sensitive to that. The other thing that I think people are sensitive to is the on-demand model really works in cable when you don't mind spending, we do both, so I'm not, you know, saying one or the other is better, because we're exploring and experimenting, just like GoTV. I think it's very nascent. There's a lot of experimentation that needs to occur, but if I'm at home picking a movie, I don't mind spending 3 or 4 minutes picking out a movie that I'm going to watch for 2 hours, right? But if I'm on my cell phone and I'm spending 2 or 3 minutes looking for a 2-minute clip or less, that's not a user experience that keeps me satisfied and coming back. And so one of the things that and that's why the EPG is so important, so that when people are looking for channels, they can see what's playing. But we're finding that people are gravitating, when we give them the option, because a lot of our products have both side by side, the live products are the channels that people are going to. And it doesn't have to be a live product. When I say live, I mean linear. So it may be a linear live, you know, news network like CNN, for example, but it may also be a music video channel that's presented, and you're not going and watching each music video one after another. You're watching a produced channel that's just playing music videos that are within this genre of music. So it's how you discover new things, and you're just, it's more of the lean back model, where you're leaning back and letting the TV entertain you.
I think the other thing that goes hand in hand with that, whether it's live or whether it's on demand, and we're seeing this in places like Korea, where there's a fairly high uptake already of 3G video, is that the viewing periods are quite different. The sense of the notion of what a prime time is for mobile is quite different, which I'm sure you've seen in your service. So that, for instance, people are watching particularly during morning and evening commutes, maybe not so much in LA other than when at red lights, and the lunch break, and also at 10 to 12 at night, which I imagine is when my 12-year-old would most like to have his cell phone, you know, in his bed when he should be sleeping. But if you think of those periods during the day and who are the people watching video on their cell phones, it's probably a very different demo than would be on network TV at 10 in the morning. And you have to, you know, think about that as well.
That's exactly right. I mean, Bill is exactly right on that, where sometimes the channel that's being programmed for regular distribution may be playing all of their prime time or their high production value content at a time that isn't prime time for mobile. And so, but what you can do then is adjust schedules, right? And so you can program the channel with the same content, but program it differently on a different schedule to accommodate the mobile subscriber. And another point that Bill mentioned that I think is dead on is the ability to pause and resume will allow people, and once we get some of that longer form content, which is just now starting to become available, thank you to Apple and iTunes, and I think that, you know, now that the confines are coming down around being able to have that content available on demand outside of cable will make a big difference.
Louis, how does this fit into what you do, though?
Chris, I was going to say, I had the perfect answer to this question until Paul came along and messed up my model.
Oh, sorry.
But think
See,
of
it's
this.
all about timing.
Well, actually, that is the third dimension, which he just brought up.
Well, weather is an exception. I will definitely say that.
Well, no, actually, everything that they were saying is right, but it all comes back to starting with the consumer. I mean, if we start by saying we are a content company and we have this stuff and we want to use it, then that's probably the wrong way to start. A better way to start is to say, you know, we have consumers, they're going to be using or wanting certain stuff. What is most appropriate? Then here's the model that I was thinking of, and I'll adapt based on what Paul said. Think of one axis in terms of made for mobile versus repurposed. So you can decide whether you make something specifically for that or you make it in another way. In addition to that, you can think of long form or live versus clips. And there are different use cases for each one. And then if you take what Paul just said, you can also time shift. So I suppose that would be the third dimension, and I'm sure there are many more. But for example, we do made for mobile forecasts for Los Angeles and 99 other cities. So every half hour, we're doing updates for locals. People care about that. It's formatted specifically for a mobile device, and we get a ton of positive feedback on that. On the other hand, if Jim Cantori is in the field in Tampa and there's a hurricane hitting, it doesn't matter to anybody whether it's repurposed or not. All they care about is if their lights are off and they have no other way of getting content, that they can get a subscription on their phone and learn whether they need to leave their home or stay. And so it really does start with what that consumer need is, all the way from the entertainment piece to the safety piece.
Excellent. And it fits into our favorite story.
Of course. Yes. Do you want me to tell it?
All right, you tell it,
Do we
and
have
then
time to
I'll
tell it?
chime in with yes,
Okay.
and then we'll go to questions.
So the last time I met with Chris, we were meeting at her office in LA, and when we arrived, the power was out. No one knew why the power was out, and everyone was scrambling to try to figure out why the power was out. And we walked in,
Bit of a
and it
panic,
was completely
actually.
unplanned. And we were walking in to brief Chris on some of the Mobi TV developments, and of course we had our Mobi TV running, and it was explaining the power outage in LA and what had happened and how the lines were clipped and when it would be restored, and it was the only way to get that news, and we had it live.
It was
on the
actually.
table.
I have accused them of cutting the cables because we
It
were
wasn't
like in
me.
the room. It was completely cast into the black, and people were thinking the worst, obviously. And here came the reassuring little Mobi TV, and I'm still convinced. Somewhere out there, you had a little guy, a little transformer.
It wasn't us. It wasn't me.
Well, it was a
anyway.
great. It's one of those subcontractors.
Right.
Let me turn it over to questions from the audience because we are running a little bit later than I expected. Right up there.
Lewis, how's that time-shifted weather working?
Okay.
Last week's weather is coming
Yeah,
up
right.
tomorrow on Mobi TV.
Thank you very much, Tim.
That's the magic.
My question is,
Oh, he has a real question.
Yeah.
Thank
Can
you,
you get
Tim.
last week's weather in here this week?
what are the workarounds? Where can a consumer go online and subscribe to content that they can have sent to their phone? How do we get around the gatekeepers?
Anyone?
Sure.
'Cause I don't know who's working
Actually,
on that.
I was looking at another statistic that said that this time last year there was only a trickle of content that was being bought off portal or outside of the net, and now, depending on the content category, it can be as much of a third. So the first thing that I would say is that it's already starting. And not only is it starting with content providers, but also the wireless carriers, by and large, are recognizing that not only is it inevitable, but also it's good for them because it drives data usage. In terms of the wares, it's still, it's very spotty, and I'd love to hear what other folks are saying, but here's a start. Number one, media companies should be using their websites to distribute content, or and if it's impossible to actually distribute, then to educate consumers on where consumers can get this content. The second thing is that smartphones are further ahead in many ways than the traditional cell phone. So you can go to websites like Fandango, et cetera, and buy applications which work on them. And beyond that, you'll see, I've seen some significant amount of programming on TV lately where there's been a commercial, get this joke, which is a text message, or see video on your phone. So I think we're starting to see education and driving behavior based on short codes. So those are three ways, but I would definitely emphasize it's early and we have a long way to go.
Bill, Sony's got some things in the works along these lines, don't you?
I'm not sure.
Okay.
I'm not sure.
Not sure what you're referring to.
Either Bill, is this something that you guys are looking at as as companies with large website presences for your content?
Yeah, I mean, I mentioned earlier mobile storefronts, and for CNN, obviously, we think there's a model around push news, breaking news. We have 6 or 7 million people that get breaking news email alerts today, and so it's very simple to be able to translate that to an SMS, whether that's a promotional free SMS breaking news alert message, or whether that SMS message then triggers, breaking news video. So I think you'll just see that as a natural extension of whether it's breaking into a linear channel via Mobi TV, or whether it's breaking into an on-demand clip as well. But CNN, in many ways, where September 11th unfortunately created what a broadband medium was about in delivering news, and the number of people that came to CNN to get what was happening, we certainly think in wireless, as breaking news happens, as major global events happen, that a wireless device where you're not prompted by the power going out to actually turn it on, but you're actually prompted by an SMS message or a message that says, here's my breaking news alert that I asked for.
I think it's actually, they're not on the panel, but Court TV has some absolutely staggering statistics about how many people subscribed to be alerted. I think it was 8 minutes before the Michael Jackson verdict was going to be announced. And that drove them to, they didn't have it on the mobile, you got the alert on the mobile, then that sent you to either the website or the linear program. And it just says things about the human condition.
And
Sir.
just for the record,
Oh, yes, please.
And just for the record, we draw the line at cutting the power in LA. We wouldn't start a war. Starting a war is just too much.
Fair enough. Sir, in the light blue.
I guess my question is, we've grown up now through the home video, the VHS, and the DVDs. Those have been very portable. DVDs certainly become very portable, taken from machine to machine. As you're talking about all the mobile society we're moving into, do I have to buy the program for each device? Can I buy a program and move it between devices?
It's a great, timely question with technology out there like the Sling Box, which basically is creating a place-shifting consumer behavior.
And which does work on mobile platforms now.
Right, and as unfortunately, and it's hard to generalize across content, obviously, because libraries are made differently than news is in terms of its inherent rights and makeup. So I think you'll continue to see that need, though. I mean, wireless is just it's a place-shifting device in and of itself. And Paul, I certainly think that there is an audience for linear services out there, but unfortunately, I mean, with our brands, we tend to think that this is so early stage that we'll program for each platform, because we think the inherent consumer usage and characteristics are actually different by platform. And we've seen that on a PC. No matter how many times people want to say, I just want to stream the television channel, we repeatedly see with our programming the need and the desire and the demand by consumers to actually have something appropriate for that platform. So.
But I think you make a good point, and that there's certainly a lot of indication that what consumers increasingly want is the ability to license a particular title and be able to use it over several different platforms. Certainly if your kids were watching a DVD in your SUV on a long trip and it's not quite over, you don't have to sit in the car to finish it. You can take the physical DVD and bring it in your home. So as we move to electronic delivery, clearly consumers are going to want to be able to have that same kind of portability without it actually being on a physical disc. And I think those things will evolve in time as the business cases are developed for them.
I think you'll continue to see that also from a marketplace perspective. As Verizon moves into television and as Comcast moves into wireless, you're going to continue to see, if they're offering basic cable on one platform, the need to be able to offer that same type of service, the quad play or whatever they like to call it, but they need to be able to simplify it and want to be able to simplify it down to a content level. Exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think it's very hopeful science.
Yeah.
There was a question back here, gentleman in the black shirt, I think it was. Oh, okay.
My question was, how do you decide and where do you decide to publish
I think the question was, how do we decide where to place or distribute our content, and are we seeing a return? From the perspective of the Weather Channel, we think that consumers keep asking to find us, and so we are looking for all the major distributors who have first-rate reputations. And so we draw the line based on kind of reputation, business practices, and reach. And then in terms of the return, it's different depending on the platform, but certainly in the cases of downloads and video, we're starting to see the return. In the cases of mobile web and messaging, in our business, it's still a little bit behind, but I know messaging for some folks is a place where there's been a tremendous return already, along with ringtone screensavers.
Pretty much the same across the board, I think, yeah? Sir in the dark blue jacket. Well, let's start with the potential competitors here
yeah,
first.
I'll take a stab at it. I mean, we have a lot of respect for the GoTV company. They are a competitor of ours. We consider them kind of co-opetition, where right now it's early stage. There aren't a lot of players. It's kind of all boats rise phenomena as we grow this space. So hopefully that answers your question. Daniel, you might want to.
We are competitors for the consumer dollar, obviously. When you go to Sprint, you're going to, Sprint TV, right? Mobi TV, which is a different model, and then GoTV. I think the primary difference, and even though you guys are moving into this business, is it's the difference between on-demand and streaming live video. When I was looking at this marketplace and was testing out all the different services, I loved the fact that I could get, like a Fox News or something, right there live, etc. What disappointed me was when it went to commercial, because I didn't have the 2 minutes at that moment to, wait for that to happen. The on-demand, different in that it really is breaking down the individual segment. So I think both ultimately end up existing, and it's a consumer preference. Some individuals are going to want their traditional brands and their live television, and some are going to want to pick and choose what they want to see.
I'm not sure I understood your Katrina question. Could you repeat it, please?
Right. Okay.
Okay.
I'll take one
You were
quick
right there, weren't you?
note on it. I think what we're going to see with CNN and a lot of the news providers, but we've just started it, where the expensive camera equipment and crews to cover major news events is dropping. That's a dynamic that's happening in the news gathering business. And so we'll outfit Anderson Cooper and other correspondents, Christiane Amanpour, whatever the major news event is, with the cameras themselves, where a number of years ago you used to see this graphic and it was a device called a video phone. What's happening is that experience, that type of application is actually getting cheaper. And so with an event like Katrina, you actually start to see video that's very raw, that's very, direct from the scene, that may be even shot by one or two different people, as opposed to having crews and then having, that filter, if you will, on news video.
I think some of the first footage we saw was actually from people with camera phones, right. And also with the London bombings, the same thing.
Certainly the London bombings, that's the first I learned of it. It's your question.
Sure, and that's, right on kind of what we look at and what our mission is largely related to. I mean, are we a business? Yes. Do we spend most of the year, most of the time delivering forecasts and lifestyle information? Yes. But when the severe weather hits, whether it's a hurricane or tornado, we need to be there. And so a handful of one thing that I would say is that we actually were there for Katrina, but people weren't using the phones for video. And so, if you look at, let's say that 1 million is a tremendous accomplishment in terms of subs. If you think of 200 million subs in the U.S., that's 0.5% penetration. And so one of the things is just a market dynamic of how many people are using the devices. That said, once you get past that, an example is severe weather mode, which we have on weather.com today and on the Weather Channel. This year is extending into mobile phones, so literally the way what you see on a screen changes depending on whether there's a severe weather alert in place. Additional video footage, new messaging products, and then there's this whole area, to Bill's point, around user-submitted video. I suspect we will only see a relatively small amount of that this year, but I expect it to grow over time.
I'm afraid that's going to be the end of it. We've had the polite message from the back here. Please join me in thanking